Most people think the hard part of retirement is getting there, building the balance, working out the numbers, picking the date. The mistakes that actually cost people money happen after that, in the first 5 years once you're actually out. And almost none of them are the mistakes you'd expect. Let's go through what really trips people up. Start with the one that costs the most in the long run. Overspending in what's genuinely called the go-go years. The first couple of years out, you've got the energy, the time, and a super balance that finally feels like yours to use. So people travel hard, say yes to everything, and spend at a pace that feels earned. Picture someone who retires and does 11 trips in their first 2 years. Because why not? They've waited decades for this. The problem isn't any single trip. It's that every dollar pulled out early doesn't just leave the balance. It stops earning for every year after that. Retirement spending naturally follows something like a wave. High in those first active years, lower through the quieter ones in your 70s and 80s, then rising again later for medical and care costs. Front-load too hard in year one, and you're borrowing against the exact years your balance needs to still be working hardest. The fix isn't refusing to enjoy the early years, it's spreading the big-ticket spending across the full 5 years instead of cramming it into the first 18 months. Now, something almost nobody budgets for at all: the actual cost of being home. When you stop commuting, some costs genuinely drop. No more petrol, no more train tickets. But that saving gets quietly eaten by new ones nobody accounts for. You're home during the day, so the heating and cooling run longer. You're seeing friends more, which means more lunches, more coffees, more dinners out. Good things, but real costs that a pre-retirement budget almost never includes. On top of that, there's what actually breaks the budgets that looked fine on paper: the lumpy expenses. Health insurance premiums that climb as you get older, plus the out-of-pocket costs for anything not covered by Medicare, allied health, certain medications, extra care. None of these are surprises in isolation, but almost nobody puts them in the retirement budget until they show up. A budget built only around groceries, bills, and one holiday a year isn't wrong. It's just incomplete, and the gap between looks fine and actually fine is usually exactly these costs. There's another cost hiding in plain sight. Inflation hits differently once you've actually stopped working. While you're employed, a rising cost of living is annoying, but you've got a lever. Ask for a raise, pick up extra hours, change jobs. The moment you're drawing down a fixed pot instead of earning a wage, that lever is gone. Prices keep climbing regardless, and unless your investments are genuinely built to keep pace, the same budget that felt comfortable in year one starts feeling tight by year 4 or 5, without a single new expense being added. Just the same expenses costing more, with no extra income to absorb it. Here's one that's rarely talked about at all: boredom spending. It sounds minor until you're living it. 30, 40 years of structure. Get up, go to work, come home, and then one day there's nowhere to be. Free time that isn't planned for has a way of turning into empty time, and empty time gets filled with something, whether that's a new hobby that quietly becomes an expensive one, or just spending simply because there's nothing else to do with the day. Picture someone who takes up fishing in their first month of retirement, genuinely enjoys it, and 18 months later realizes they've spent several $1,000s on gear they use a handful of times a year. Not a disaster on its own, but multiply that pattern across 2 or 3 new interests running at once, and it adds up to a real, ongoing leak nobody planned for. This is the same reason so many retirees who seemed financially fine on paper still find their spending running hotter than expected. It's not one big mistake, it's a lot of small ones with nothing else competing for the money or the time. Now for the one that catches people who did everything right financially. If most of your working life has been in a low-risk environment, a stable salary, a conservative fund, maybe a defined benefit scheme, retirement can suddenly hand you the biggest balance you've ever had, right as it moves into market-exposed investments for the first time. It can feel like a windfall. After decades of a modest, steady income, seeing a large lump sum sitting there triggers a very natural "I've earned this, I can afford it" instinct. The catch is that the balance isn't a bonus. It's the machine that has to produce your income for the next 20 or 30 years. And because it's now exposed to the market at the exact moment it's largest, a downturn in those first few years does more damage than the same downturn would 10 years later, simply because there's more money there for the drop to apply to. This is what's known as sequencing risk. The same average return over 30 years can produce wildly different outcomes depending on whether the bad years land early or late. A downturn in year 2, while you're also drawing an income out, permanently shrinks what's left to recover with. The same downturn in year 20, after the balance has already had time to grow and after less of it is typically still invested, barely moves the needle. This is exactly why the first 5 years deserve more caution with drawdowns than instinct suggests, not less. The balance looking bigger than you're used to isn't a signal to spend more freely. It's a signal to be more deliberate about pacing than ever before. And finally, the one that's hardest to say no to. Helping family early, before you've actually tested whether the plan can absorb it. It's an easy trap precisely because it comes from a good place. You've got the time and, right now, the money, and it feels good to help with a grandchild's trip, a car, a house deposit. Picture a couple 2 years into retirement, feeling comfortable, who cover a grandchild's overseas trip 1 year, then a car the next, then start chipping in on a deposit the year after. Each decision reasonable in isolation, made in the moment the balance happened to look healthy. None of it was reckless. None of it was ever added up against the actual 30-year plan either. The problem is the same one running through this whole list. These early years are exactly when every dollar spent has the most years left to have compounded. And generosity spent from the moment rather than from the plan is still spending the years you'll need later. A single rule cuts through most of this cleanly. Help if it's already accounted for in the plan, not instinctively because the balance currently looks flush. Put your own plan first, the same way you'd secure your own oxygen mask before helping anyone else with theirs. Not because family doesn't matter, but because a plan that runs out early helps nobody, including them. So here's the honest shape of the first 5 years. It's not about having saved enough. Most of the people this catches did save enough. It's about pacing what you've saved, pacing the travel, budgeting for the costs nobody puts on the list, planning for the time as seriously as the money, staying deliberate about risk right when the balance looks biggest, and helping family from the plan rather than from the moment. Get the pacing right in these 5 years, and the next 20 tend to take care of themselves. Get it wrong, and it's not one bad decision that causes it. It's 5 quiet ones, each reasonable on its own. 2 honest notes before you go. First, retirement spending patterns, investment settings and account structures are personal and vary a lot by situation, so treat the examples here as illustrations, not a template to copy directly. Second, this is general information, not personal advice. How you should pace your own spending and how much risk your own balance should carry in these early years depends entirely on your specific numbers and goals. So this is exactly the kind of thing to take to a licensed financial advisor before you make any changes. If any of these hit close to home, tell me in the comments which one. It helps me know what to cover next. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.